Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Challenge 40 Battle of the Arrows or RHAP podcast for episode 3. I am Brian Cohen. With me, as always, is my co-host, Alice here. Ali, how are you?
I'm doing well. For the YouTube viewers, I'm in sport mode, travel mode, feeling good. How are you?
Doing good. Yeah, we got the classic Ali headset going on here for the video podcast. A nice throwback. Love to see it. I'm doing great. I was coming into this week with a big difference of takes until the last like 3 minutes, and then it all got flipped around. And now I'm doing very well. I'm doing very well. So is Sunny.
So that's interesting. I see the only thing that has changed for me between the beginning of this episode and the end is the drinking game rule I was going to add because it was spoiler alert Tony centric, which now I will not be adding.
Right. Well, we could do there's other rules I guess we could come up with.
For sure.
Back. But
We're not limited.
We got a first taste of what the actual season will look like. Obviously, episode 1 and 2, we had the Era Invitational. So here we got a good idea of the structure, the format, what the rest of the season is going to look like, and I'm excited to discuss it all.
Yeah, let's get to it. It's interesting, like the way this was set out in the beginning of the episode, because we got a lot of kind of like quick hits that don't really go anywhere and don't really pay off towards the end. So maybe we're setting up for the season, or if maybe it's just like a hot topics segment. But I feel like we got like a minute on a few topics du jour.
Yeah, notably the Devin and Bananas one I found to be kind of odd. I mean, I know it was the idea of like karma could be coming into play with that, but I feel like Devin and Bananas, I feel like they're okay now. Like, obviously, they've had their beef in the past, but I feel like they're on decent terms. Although I thought that with other people that doesn't seem to be. But it seems like Devin is still harboring some things with Johnny that could come up later.
Okay, I watched this part twice. I'm glad you started with this because at first I wasn't like totally locked in. You know, the beginning of the episode, I got to get my Google Docs up, I got to get going, got to get situated. And I wasn't like looking at the TV when I heard the audio of Devin being like, we should all know the feeling of beating someone who sucks and sending them home. So then I went back and was like, who's Devin talking about from this season? And it was the flashback to when Devin beat Banana. So like I thought that was a full clip from the actual elimination with Devin and Bananas. That was the flashback clip, but a current confessional of Devin saying that about Bananas.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like a Frankenbite. Yeah, so I don't know. Like the confessional wasn't directed at him, but the flashback was. So I don't know. Again, is this like a Frankenbite that they just want to make it seem like he's still harboring thing, or something the audience would connect to Devin wanting to get like revenge on Bananas from that moment? But that feels like so long ago at this point. I don't think that's what people would jump to. And there's so many other people on the show that could have given that same confessional about like standing up to the bully, that it's weird that it's Devin about Bananas.
So it's giving Legally Blonde. Why now? Why this sperm? Like, what was it even related to? Of like, who went home that was the bully? Like, who is this even about? Leroy? This is still like the story they were trying to tell us that Devin cares about sending Leroy home. Like, I'm sorry, not buying it. Return, like, gift receipt. I don't like it.
Maybe also you can weave in like the Cara going against Bananas and Laurel, like standing up to that bully, but I don't think Devin really gives two shits about that. So it was just a very oddly placed confessional, especially to start the episode. It's like, why are we starting with Devin? It was odd. It was all odd.
I agree, and perhaps most confusingly, drinking game rules. Does this count? Is this a flashback in the frame?
Yeah, like it's a flashback to another season.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
We also get Darrell and Janae both clocking like, weird that the losers stuck around. And then we don't see anything else about that. No discussion. And, jumping to the end, we don't see the eliminated contestants cast their karma votes on this episode. It's not even discussed.
Yeah, very odd. I don't know why they wouldn't show it. It would be like a 2-second clip. Maybe on like, they do like, sometimes like MTV comes out the next day with like the extended version of like the episode, and maybe it's like usually they have like extended episode with like an interview with the eliminated people, and maybe it's in that. I don't know why they wouldn't include it because they made it such a big thing for the 2-part premiere of like Karma and people delivering these votes, and this time it's only 2 people doing it. Last time they had to cover 8 people doing votes. You would think this would be 30 seconds. They'll be like, who are they voting for? Is there any chance it's only for the Era Invitational people that got to do this? There's no chance, right?
I mean, like, my gut instinct is like, absolutely not. That's insane that you would say that. And then it's like Kombucha Girl, like, huh? Like, maybe now that you said it, because it seems like they want to make it a common theme. Like I would have thought, based on this first episode, the beginning of the second episode, they'd want to make it a reoccurring bit of they keep having the eliminated people stay, they keep having the surviving people leave. And then at the top of every episode, we get a new person being like, isn't that so weird? I wonder if those people are still here. The fact that they don't do it this episode does kind of like stand to reason that maybe it was one time only, but that's deranged.
It's crazy. And like, there wasn't even that much bad karma of like the people from episode the Era Invitational, you were being voted in. You had a choice of like 2 people. So it's not like there was like backstabbing going around that like they went all the way to like voted. Like they were choosing between 2 or 3 people to vote in, and they were deciding their karma points off. That very odd. But you know what? That would be so challenge to do it here, and it would be kind of, you know what? Let's have it happen.
One nice moment, and probably Tony's only nice moment this episode. We'll get to the reaction to Tony this week, but Tony's celebrating, and he was like, I was expecting Leroy to be stronger, or, maybe I underestimated myself. And I thought that was like kind of a touching moment, especially in a season like Challenge 40, where there's some people who are sort of defined legends. We get Darrell kind of saying that too, of like, I'd like to use this season to solidify myself in the challenge legend category. I think Leroy is there despite not winning. And Tony kind of being the voice of the audience of like, I overestimated Leroy and underestimated myself, and I feel good about that. And like, I felt good for him for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, he'll always have this moment of his time to shine in season 40, but it's kind of fair. I feel like if you were stacking up those 8 eliminations going into last week, Tony versus Leroy was probably the most fair on the board, and it was maybe the biggest blowout on the board. I guess Paulie and Theo could have something to say about that, but this said, like, I mean, Amanda put up a better fight against Naya. Katie put up a better fight against Anissa than Leroy did against Tony, so good on Tony for wrecking him.
Yeah, some tinfoil hat theory that I think we touched on last week almost as like a joke. And then I saw someone in the Facebook group say that it was like, confirmed from an unconfirmed source. Similar rumors about Leroy as are being talked about on the episode with Tony about like whether he really wanted to be there or not, which I'm going to just put out there. I'm going to get really sick and tired of Challenge 40. The first few episodes, the first few eliminations being about like people who just came to collect checks and go home. I'm here. You need to be here too. Like, I'm happy to be here. What's your story?
Yeah, and it's also interesting because Tony, like, we've seen people just show up for a check and really not give a crap, and it seems more obvious. Like Tony seemed like he cared. Like, he put up a fight to stay out of the elimination in the Era Invitational when it seemed like it was so obvious he was going in. But I thought he put up as good of an argument that he could possibly do to try to save himself. It didn't work, but he did it, and then he smoked Leroy. And then through this episode, obviously, like, his decision of like not choosing to basically throw himself in, still don't read that as him not wanting to be here. I read that as like the ego talk that like Derek and everyone else and Bananas was like talking about, that this was just Tony's ego and wanting to do big moves and thinking this is not playing scared. Like, I don't know, but people in the house, if they all feel this way, they were around him obviously much more than we are, so maybe they have a better vibe on it. But that's not the vibe I picked up on, that he was just like here for the check and wants to go home.
So to me, the most damning evidence of that is really how many sound bites, how many minutes the show dedicated to that sort of mindset. Like, I feel like that spoke to the production being irritated, or like, why are we getting jabs at him? You can tell the same narrative without those, jabs being included in the edit. And it's like a really weird thing for production to include, because I think whether it's true or not, I'd rather not see that in the edit. Cause like as a viewer, it makes me upset. It makes me upset that Leroy went home. It calls into question, did Leroy want to come home? It's like the house of cards is falling down if everybody's just there for the metagame of the big check and not caring about playing. The other piece of damning evidence to me is how piss poor his challenge performance actually was. I agree. It's very strange because I think he made the best argument he could have made last week to stick around. So, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Is it possible that he was really motivated to come in and stay, and 3 days go by and he really misses his kids and he really misses his wife, and he sees the hand he's drawn in the game and he's like, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on this. If I'm in the elimination, I might as well go home. Or if I could sway Avery, great. And if I can't win, I go home. I don't know that he came in destined to quit, but I could see sort of the truth being in the middle.
The question also that I would have is how big is Tony's paycheck? I understand they want to get a good crop of people for 40, but are people oh boy, we got Tony here. This makes season 40 the really big one. I can't why would they have to really lay out the big check to get Tony here? If you're gonna lay out the big check, get Landon here, get Evelyn here. Save that money for people that would be worth it. For Tony, if he's here, it's great. It's fun. I was happy to see Tony. But I don't think he would even be one of the top 5 people, top 10 people if he wasn't on this, being damn, I really wish Tony was here.
It would be very interesting for someone to talk to someone on the production side of the challenge, because while Landon certainly appeals to the challenge diehards, does Tony bring in more of a casual audience who's familiar with Tony in that era versus the people who are going to watch the show regardless? Mm-hmm. I do think Tony, based on the reception we got to Tony's return for All Stars and his quick exit in All Stars, I do think Tony's in the conversation of people that draw eyes here that maybe wouldn't have been here otherwise. But yeah, it's a fair question just in general. I do think even the least big draw probably gets paid a good amount just to show up. And then the question is it's not like Survivor where they keep them sequestered. They send them home after. So there's really no risk, even if it's 10 grand, which I think it's more than that based on nothing. For $10,000, would you be flown somewhere for a week and go home at your leisure? 5 days in, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, look, no harm to him. He gets the bag, he can do it, but it just seems it doesn't seem like that drastic. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what the truth is for Tony? So,
something more confusing to me, and I'm more unclear on, is why we got the segment of Cara saying how comfortable, I'm sad Paulie's gone, but I'm so comfortable with others in the house. Sorry to Bananas and Laurel who hate me. But she's then seen with Rachel. She's seen hugging Theo, which I thought was very interesting, in his uniform that he took Paulie out in. Are we building the house is with Cara and not necessarily with Bananas and Laurel this season?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. Based off how teams were targeted, it seemed like they didn't want to work with Team 2, Era 2. So could that be a point of wanting things to go poorly for Bananas and Laurel? It's possible. I mean, the one thing we noticed, even with Bananas, he would have kind of almost felt out of his element in Era 1. He didn't feel fully secure there. He doesn't have his other Era 2 guys with him here. And he's kind of have had some beefs with some of the other people. Now Leroy's gone. So he probably doesn't really have as much connection. So the house could probably flip on him. And Laurel makes it hard for people to want to be with her at different times. So it could easily flip on her. But Cara makes it hard for people to not be with her. So it's a very shaky house if they're with Cara, I would say. Yeah, no,
it's more exciting to me, in terms of the prospect of the season moving forward. One thing, just to address the haters for a moment. If you're not a hater, feel free to fast forward for 30 seconds. We got some very mild, a hater's in a strong word, some mild response of we're biased. Bananas and Laurel were totally right. Cara sucks. Bananas shouldn't trust Cara. I'm not even a Cara stan. You're certainly, your history is checkered in terms of coming for Cara on this podcast. I think that just goes to show what an insane game move we thought it was episode 1 to come after Cara. And I think based on what we at least see as the format for the season, moving forward, which we'll discuss, I think we were absolutely right to question that. So I just want to clarify, it was not because we're Cara stans. though I'm being, my hand is being forced based on what I'm seeing on this season.
Yeah, that's how I am. Like, I've never asked. I don't really want to be in the car at camp. And I'm sure I will leave it very soon through this season.
Dear Mom, please take me home from the car again.
I don't want to be here. But Laurel and Bananas are making it like, how do you not side with Cara? And even like going back to the decision, it's kind of like the thing we always point to sometimes with, rookies or one or two time players is the challenge. You don't know how a challenge season is going to work. And it's always a risk to do a big shot episode 1 when you do not know how the format works. It's not like you go into a season of Survivor or Big Brother and you know how the game is played. You know, like how the structure of 1 week to the next is going to go. When you start a challenge season, it could be quite literally anything. So to do a big move like that so early without knowing what's going to happen is such a risk. And for people like Bananas and Laurel to do that is a big dumb move.
Facts. And then I guess the last hot topic before we get to the real discussion, I think that starts with Aviv and Darrell. I just want to give a tip of the cap or a tip of the ill-fitting aviation style headset to Michelle, who I think plays Horacio's vulnerability very well here. I think this is sort of step 1 of a longer term plan for Michelle. Horacio is doing his like Lonely Hearts Club. Woe is me. How am I going to continue without Nerys? And there's Michelle to kind of scoop up the pieces. I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to lift him up. You got to keep fighting. We're going to make it as fun for you as possible. What could be a very strange relationship between Michelle and Horacio based on their relationships with Nerys and Olivia, respectively. It's a genius play for Michelle to just kind of start being there for Horacio. And then, to quote Seinfeld, suddenly she'll just, it starts as being there for you, and then suddenly she's just there. And I think that's great strategy.
Yeah, it's absolutely perfect. And this is the hint of Survivor Michelle coming out. This is her element. Her element is playing with people, not manipulating people, and like getting into their good graces, being friends, being that person that people can be they can rely on her. So this was great. She's going to need Horacio. Michelle, more than anyone knows, she's not having many friends through this house, and to have Horacio, who has shown in the past when he is loyal to someone, he will do anything for them. He's like sacrificing himself down the road or throwing himself in front of he'll do whatever he needs to do for his friends. So having Horacio on your side, especially for Era 4 losing 2 very strong people, that like she needs him as much as like anyone else would need someone.
Totally. All right. How far into this Aviv and Darrell conversation were you before you were convinced it was going to be Aviv versus Darrell in the elimination tonight? Or is that just me?
Yeah, I would say like 5 seconds. I would say the second we got the clip, it's like, all right, well, it's either setting up that like someone's going to be super loyal, or probably Darrell or Aviv is going to turn their back on the other one. It's going to be like, hey, what the hell? This is crazy. So at least we got the setup, though. I appreciate it.
It's interesting, like getting this set up and having it pay off very minimally of like Darrell making the obvious choice of like, well, I'd rather go against Aviv and Derek. It's not some big betrayal, and they don't actually go in against each other, and neither of them go home. Right. So to me, this setup is like, is Aviv going to go to the distance? Like, do we need to like really learn about Aviv because she's going to be here for the long haul?
She might be. I mean, with this setup and people having free reign to kind of target whoever they want, it sets up decently for someone like Aviv. Maybe they won't even look to her. Once the shots go firing back and forth, Aviv, if like for someone like Aviv staying out of the line of fire for like the next like 2 weeks and having all the other targets already lined up to like the returning fire, it could be great for her. And she can like just skate on by and let like Laurel take the shot at Tori and take the shot at Cara and take the shot at Rachel or whatever it might be. Like let all those other shots go back and forth, and who's going to fire the shot at Aviv?
Yeah, I mean the only downside, right, is if somebody decides to target people based on social connections. I don't want to aggravate people. You're the easiest pick, but to be on the team with the strongest women, as we've said frequently about her era, she's in a great position, especially with the tone set by Avery and Darrell this week. Like, she flopped the best hand of like her closest ally being the one to name names, which we'll talk about in the elimination. So I think you're exactly right to say like she's got like 2 very safe, solid weeks, and then she can use that time to build relationships, build alliances. Like her disadvantage only lasts so far in terms of she hasn't been in touch with people for 18 years, as she unbelievably says. I can't believe it's been 18 years. But you can make up a lot of ground in 5 days on the challenge in terms of relationships.
Yeah. And then not to pat myself on the back too hard, but I believe in our episode 0 coverage, I clocked the scene of Brad scoping out Emily. And I believe I was met with chagrin by the other 2 people on the panel. I'll be like, oh, what does Emily want to do with Brad? Maybe Brad wants Emily. And I think Brad and Emily are a little hot and heavy.
Okay. I think you did not remember what happened here, because I think we were not criticizing you, but we were criticizing the edit of like, it was all told through Brad's perspective.
Right.
If I projected that I thought it would be insane for Emily to be into Brad, I mean, I have eyes. I've seen Brad. That would be crazy. But no, I think my intended criticism, and I think Mike's too, is like they only discussed Emily through the lens of Brad. I'm happy to see them discuss Brad only through the lens of Emily. Like, we don't hear one peep from Brad, I think, in the last 2 episodes.
Do you think Emily's the only person like on the planet whose type could be Brad and Casey? Like, that is such a drastic of types, and to have them both be like, "Oh, I'm eyeing both of them." That's a wild combo.
Okay, this is wild. When you said when she was like, "I'm sorry, Nani, I'm in love with Casey too," that was like her clocking Casey as her type also?
I think so.
I thought that was her just like, sorry, I don't mean to offend. Like, she's connected to you, Nani, and no offense. Like, I'm in love with her. She's great.
No, but I think it's like if Casey was not with Nani, Emily would be making the move on Casey.
That is such a stretch from what she was talking about.
Oh, okay. I could be wrong.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. You know what? Now that you mention it, it makes more sense, your interpretation. And I botched the Chicken Little, although I think I did a better job than CT even did. So I don't, that's not being corrected. So I interpreted her saying of like, I vibe better with like the old school and I want to get the new people out, except for Casey. I wish Casey wasn't connected to Nani, meaning Emily owes some kind of connection to Nani, whatever. Now I get what you're saying. I do think you're probably right that she was like, if only Casey wasn't connected to Nani. That said, no, full credit. I enjoy. If you're wrong, I'm wrong too. If you have one fan, RAP me, whatever. But I do think on the if I were to put all of them on the spectrum of like someone's type, I think Brad and Casey are closer together than you think.
Interesting. Okay.
Muscular, competitive, kind of strong, silent type. I mean, the beard definitely is a huge differential, but
right,
the biceps are there.
We got Josh and Naya, the love affair that lasts about 30 minutes in the episode. Poor Josh.
May I just say,
please,
that this episode, in such a beautiful way, like Chicken Soup, felt like Chicken Little Soup, felt like such an old school season, and not even old school like season 1, 2, 3, 10, whatever. Such an era 2.5, 3 episode, like early Us era. Like, I'm about to have a big monologue defending Josh and like deciding who's right in this drunken fight that escalates, what the real source is. Like, it's not the source. It is about the pasta. It's not about the pasta. Like, we haven't really had an issue like this, I feel like, in a long time on the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to it, but that scene obviously was great. You had Michelle eating the noodles in classic, like, old school challenge fashion of like you catch someone eating like, the cold cuts or the noodles while a drunken fight is going on, the toga party. It was all around a lot of fun vibes going on this week.
And they're talking about it. Like, CT pro tip, it's okay to have fun. I love that they address, like, we kind of like haven't been having fun like this in a while. Right. What do you think's different about 40? Is it production? Is it the people who are there? Is it the 40-person cast? Why is it so different?
It's a good question. I mean, obviously with this season, they cast to be, for the most part, worthy of being on this season. You have to be a dynamic person to some degree. Like, yeah, like maybe you skew more towards like a Casey Horacio, like more athletic and like more of that jargon. But even right now, there's 32 of them. a lot of them are like the big personalities. They want to have fun. They also want to put on a good show. I'm sure they all probably feel some level of pressure of like, this is season 40. Like, we should make it fun. A lot of them probably feel like this is their last hurrah to do something like this. A lot of them are like away from their kids, away from their responsibilities. It's like a little bit of like a summer camp vibe. Like, when I get back home, I have a much different life. Let me have fun here. It could be just a lot of different things kind of bumbling together.
Yeah, when you do that production interview, I want you to ask about that. The hypothetical one that I'm now speaking exclusively to is like, do you think the show, like, is the show like bring a costume, doing kind of some more old school stuff? Or is like Tina on the horn being like, guys, bring a toga, bring these things, like kind of like the old school, like what happens with All Stars? I mean, my understanding of even like the early seasons is that was all cast led. We decided to bring stuff. We discussed it and we all brought this. Cara missed the memo. She didn't have like a totally on theme costume, but she did have something. So I just, I'm sort of in between. Yes, it's season 40 and either that's self-driven or production is kind of wanting a little bit more of an old school vibe, or just like having Tina and Rachel and Derek K and some of these older school people on a challenge proper, and they're like doing the old stuff and it still hits. Let's keep doing it.
Yeah. And I think, it'll start to play out more going to next week when it's now that the rules are defined. But I think one of the other issues that was going on in like the late 30s was at no point was a lot of people safe. They were making like the decision at the elimination where everyone was up for grabs. And now going forward, the 8 people on the block. So like next week, everyone else is 100% safe for that week. Yes, you might have to make decisions and do whatever you have to do, but everyone else is safe. So they can like let loose a little bit and like build their social capital and do things like that. But they don't have to worry about going in that week. Like, you're safe. So I think that didn't play as much of a factor here at the start of the episode, but like going forward to next week, now the other 22 people, they know they're safe for the week, so they can have a little fun.
I think that's a huge distinction, and definitely something they haven't done in a while. So I think that's a really good point. All right, let's get to the daily because this is when we really can dig into the theme here. We learn, moving forward, you're going to work as a team. Obviously, it doesn't say how forward, but at least in the immediate present. And they get told to pick one man and one woman to represent their era. Now, Anissa speaks, I think, every challenge fan's mind of like, it absolutely cannot be me. I was born at night, not last night. I will not be volunteering.
Yeah, obviously they did this format either like All Stars 1 or All Stars 2 with like the team captain. You're basically putting yourself on the line. Either you're going to be safe and you have the power, or if you lose, you go in. So it would be wild to think anything else that was going to happen with this pairing. Knowing if you lose, or you're either 100% going in, or you're on the chopping block to go in. I don't think they said to start the challenge that last place goes in directly. I think he saved that for after the fact, but at the very least, you were going to be one of the 3 pairs up for grabs to be voted in.
I think that the little bit of a surprise, which maybe it shouldn't have been, but at least to me, and it seemed like to the cast, is like, typically, yes, if you're in the bottom, you go in, but if you win or you aren't in the bottom, you're safe or you have some power, there's some reward or incentive to be the captain. Here, it was like 3 out of 4 of these pairs became very vulnerable. So spoiler alert, I'm glad that's not the format moving forward, because at this point I was like, there's just no incentive to be captain. It's like, to be everybody else is safe, like just avoid being captain. Obviously that's not how it goes. Were you surprised at who sort of emerged as the leaders from each era?
The only thing I was surprised was there wasn't as much pushback from a lot of people. I'm surprised that like no team got to pulling straws or like rock, paper, scissors or anything like that to that degree. Like there was enough like, all right, I'll do it. Like Tony was like up for doing it. Like the era 1 people, they were just kind of up for doing it. I was surprised there wasn't like, no, like none of us are going to agree to do it. And we're just going to have to like do some random draw to kind of decide.
Yeah, they yada if there was any like real debate here. So era 1 is Jody and Darrell. I was a little surprised with Darrell, though I think Derek taking the hit and going in last week kind of absolves Derek, and he's probably most likely to step up, as demonstrated by last week. And what's Darrell going to say? CT, like our best players got to go on the line. CT, right. You couldn't pay him enough to volunteer. So
no shot.
I guess that tracks. Era 2 with Derek and Aviv, to me, that reeks of Era 2, like strong arming them and like nominating them. And Derek being like, yeah, no, I'll volunteer, like I'll prove myself here. But that is like two of the quote unquote weaker people on that team. You know, Ryan having gone in last week. So that tracked. Era 3, Tony and Avery. You'd think your boy Tony would get a break given that he just went into the elimination, but that team, I guess it maybe could have flipped the attention to Corey because like Jordan and Devin were never going in here, in my opinion.
And I guess this, if you want to put another point in the Tony just wants to go home bucket, he probably knows, just like everyone else, like, oh, if you lose this, you probably go, like, you're going into elimination, you're going home. He was really one of the only people just to directly volunteer. Now, he does give, like, an excuse to play devil's advocate. It was a clear, like, eating thing, and he is probably the best eater amongst anyone on there. So if it was in the mind of Tony wants to stay, him rolling the dice and being like, this is actually like the perfect daily for me to like take the risk and get power and set my structure up. This is a good move. But if you're of the camp that Tony wants to go home, and this was kind of a great opportunity for him to like put himself out there to be ready to go home.
Yeah, when Tony said time to clock in, just send me to the moon. That was like the funniest thing of all time. Yeah, and then Casey and Kylan was an interesting one for me. It is very in Casey's wheelhouse, I think, to be like, I'm going to volunteer even if like my mind is telling me it's stupid. It's like my competitive spirit and my leadership is like, I got to get involved. I really expected more from Kylan, you know, like I would have seen like Horacio more take this step, especially being wounded from losing to Reese. I was very, very, Kylan is kind of too strategic of a player to kind of step forward here.
Yeah, I was surprised it wasn't Horacio being like, I want to, for all the people who, for anyone in the game who would most be like, I just kind of want to go home. Horacio would almost be like the number one pick on the board. They'd be like, I just want to like I haven't seen, I'm on another show for 8 months. I finally get to see Reese, and she goes home immediately. It's like, screw this. Let me just like roll the dice and go home here. But, you know, maybe they talked him out of it and, you know, Kylan took the bullet for him. I don't know. But it was kind of surprising to see Kylan take the risk here.
See, I think Horacio has just too much of the spirit of a competitor to ever throw anything. Like, I think it could be like, whatever would be the biggest carrot at the end of the stick for Horacio if you just throw this challenge, I don't think he'd be able to do it.
Yeah, I'm not in the sense of like I want to go home, but it's like I'll take the bullet. If I go home, I'll save everyone else.
Playing with house money, yeah,
type of thing.
All right, now I don't love gross food challenges in any of my reality television, but it did also kind of feel like a return to form of like we actually had quote unquote gross food and not like blended tuna protein shakes that we've had in recent seasons. I thought we had moved to onions and garlic. I didn't realize we could still get local delicacies that, you know, turn the like bland American palate stomach.
Yeah, and it wasn't an overdue of people eating a lot of stuff and puking, because obviously there's so many of them. There's still 8 people on each team, and everyone just had to eat one thing. So it wasn't like the montage of puking that we're typically seeing. And it was like in the middle of the daily. Yes, we thank you. Although I'm not giving them the full thanks. I very much anticipate it coming back at a later point in the season. But there was, you know, the classic now that's part of basically any daily kayaking in the mix. There was, you know, ordering the seasons. I almost feel like they kind of like did too much in this one. Like, I feel like this ordering the seasons could have been like its own challenge in a way. Like, they made it like a heavier structure puzzle or something like that. I feel like they kind of wasted it here on such like just like lifting pole like flags and things. I feel like that should have been a much more monumental daily than just like tossed at the end of this. So I feel like that kind of wasted that a little bit.
So I see that criticism. On the whole, I loved sort of the 3 parts. I loved the variety. I think they really, you know, in a different season, I feel like any one part of this, I mean, not one part could have been a challenge, but I thought it was like a good variety, another, not a mini final, but just, you know, whatever. Something for everyone. I like okay.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I liked seeing them work together on the boat, like especially seeing Era 4. It was like, wow, these people really haven't been in a team challenge like this. I feel like not since War of the Worlds 2 or something. I mean, I'm probably wrong about that. It just feels like that's the last time I remember seeing a bigger team work together. I guess the Bejeweled season, whatever that was.
Right.
But like that felt refreshing to me. Seeing like 10 people struggle on a boat was fun. To your point about the shields, I don't disagree, but I think the point they made of like who didn't study this, because of course this is going to be part of it, made me happy. They kind of just put it at the end. Like if they tried to make it like the last big challenge and this is so monumental, I think everybody knows it. Nobody really struggled with it.
Yeah, I mean, look, you definitely give Tori credit. She took lead on that one, so she kind of deserves props. But the point for Tori, like they do like the pregame interviews, each team talks, and she just gave just like such a cringe pick me line of, oh, we got Jordan, Devin, and Tony to lead us in the battle and like decide to make all the decisions. Thank God we had these big three strong men. It's like, that's gross. Come on, Tori. That was gross.
I mean, that's how Tori emerged, right? Like that's how Tori survived to become the challenge legend she is her first season, like sidling up with the legendary men. But yeah, no, it doesn't make it any but less cringe for sure, especially when, I think if we were to give an MVP every challenge, I think Tori absolutely would be the MVP, as you said, for, knocking out the seasons. At least that's what we're made to see. Mm-hmm. And once again, the women really, showed out. Olivia and Michelle get credit in Era 4 for making the boat happen for Era 4. So despite Tori's preview, it was a strong day for the women in the challenge.
They did great. Brad continuing his All-Stars train of suckiness, screwing up bad for Era 1, not knowing how to do a rudder. So Era 1 surprisingly taking last place here.
What's the, that was really what I was thinking when I saw that Emily and Brad like confirmed hooking up portion of the show, is like, all right, we heard a lot of excuses from Brad. He went through a really tough breakup. He didn't get a lot of sleep. Let's see what he does when he's in love and it's being reciprocated. And the answer is not much better.
Yeah, not much better. And now he's got like CT and Rachel and all these other people to start yelling at him when he's sucking in the challenges. So it could be a rough time for Brad. Brad needs to like get his head on straight and maybe get some tips from Emily about how to perform in the game structure.
I do want to clock that I think Era 4 really implemented their patented strategy of putting something in your mouth quickly and immediately throwing up. I think, Era 1, some of the other eras were really doing the classic get it down and big tongue out. It's like, you don't really need to put your tongue out. Everyone just threw it up into the bucket on Era 4. But yep. I liked seeing the variants, and sad for Era 1, who shout out to the editing, who I kind of thought they'd have a chance, but it seemed like they were out of it, almost immediately.
Yep. Pretty much. So yeah, it was pretty much a blowout, like first, second, third, fourth. There really wasn't much closeness in between really any of the eras, it seemed like.
So we find out, perhaps controversially, perhaps not, that Tony and Avery of Era 3, the winners, are going to be safe. They're going to be in power hosting in the chambers.
Yep.
And then the representatives of all of the other teams, it does not matter where Era placed in terms of second or third, they're going to come in and be interviewed to go in against the dead last losers of Era 1, Jody and Darrell.
Yeah, so at this point, this was like the lowest I felt about the structure of the season. Because in my head, what's happening is it's just setting up for this is going to be a throwing daily palooza of if they get to pick who they want as the captains, people are going to be throwing things left and right. You can like Anissa is going to be in if they want to get Cara in. Like it's just going to be that's going to be the theme of who could throw the daily the most to get someone in. And then there's going to be like no real political game because it's like you're only voting between two pairs. The whole house isn't up for grabs. You can't. We find out later, which I wasn't even that fan of. You can't pick and choose the era. You have to pick the two people from one era. You can't do one man, one woman from different eras. So I was like, this is what they came up with for 40. This structure sucks. It's gonna be like the opposite of the Red Skull twist of like the dailies, just everyone's throwing things. It's gonna be so bad. So I was very low on the structure of the season at this very moment in time.
Totally agree. I don't often like to reference my notes. All cap. There is absolutely no incentive to be the leader. Like everybody else is safe. Just whatever. I too am relieved that this is not going to be the case. Though I do think it will incentivize cross-era alliances, and that we still might see people throwing challenges because you are safe as a team, as long as you're not the captain. If you lose, there's no consequence to losing as the team. There's no team bank account that you're trying to get incentivized to get money in. So I think that's still at risk, certainly not as bad as it would be. And I think we do have to consider how far they really believe these era teams are going to go, because how hard do you want to fight to save the strongest people on your team if you don't believe that the final is going to be run by teams? Obviously, that's a big risk to chip away your own at your own team when you don't know how the format's going to work. I'm going to try not to say this every week. I wish they knew how long this would go, or if it would transfer to an individual game, much like Survivor. How long do you want to keep tribe strength before you go into the individual game? I still think it would be interesting if they knew what to strategize around.
Yep. And to like the throwing challenges point, I think it could still happen for sure. But at the very least, it's a huge risk. It's putting your money where your mouth is. Where if Banaz and Laurel want to throw a challenge for Cara, sure, she might go in, she might win, and then your backs are against the line next week. So if you want to roll the dice, and if you feel like Anissa is that big of a dead weight on your team to get her out, sure, you can do it. She might win the elimination, and then you're going right in the next week. So at the very least, it can't just be like an every week thing, a complete dog pile. So there is at the very least some checks and balances with that, which is a huge, huge plus.
Totally. So it was very fun to see the house kind of scramble and learning this and see how they're going to sort of strategize in advance of going in the chamber. We see people like Josh trying to cut a deal like on behalf of the whole era. Like Josh isn't even at risk, and he's like, Tony, if you watch my era, we'll watch your era. Versus like an Avery, and this ends up being the whole crux, is like, Derek's one of my best friends. We saw that happen on All Stars. We saw a discussion of that. Good setup there. And I'm going to care more about my friend than my like longevity in the game or working on behalf of my era.
Yeah, and it was interesting is as they were going through these conversations in my head, because I don't think they'd even declared yet. I think we found that out officially in the chamber, but I was like, well, can they just split the difference? And they vote in, they keep Derek safe, and they keep the vote in Darrell. Like they could have just split the baby there. But obviously that's not the case, which definitely made it more complicated. But it's funny, like the things that they were promising. Which again goes to show like you don't know the structure of a challenge season until you let the first full cycle play out. Like even what they were promising, there was no weight to it. Like Josh could promise safety for whoever he wants. He has no say in the matter. Like it's about the eras, and like they have once you go in, you're gonna have your own vendettas to go up against. Like it's just so funny now looking back on everything that was being promised to each other for all these different deals. Is like none of these deals had any weight once you find out what the actual structure of the season is.
No, totally. But I do think like that brings up an interesting point of like, are you loyal to yourself and what your individual game would be? And, Derek's close with me and who my allies are, or are you loyal to the best interest of your era, where Casey is probably very well connected or the most well-connected person to era 3, but happens to not be connected to Avery or Tony. So do you work on behalf of the interest of your era? Do you work on behalf of yourself? Like, I think, I'm very excited to see where this goes. I think it is a really, really interesting, way to work the format.
Tony had a very odd line that, for me, kind of goes to show he doesn't really know the game. He said that Avery is blinded by friendship. I feel like the challenge at its core is very much a friendship game. It's keep your friends safe, especially in recent years. It's like whoever your friends are, you try to ride with them all the way to the end and go to the final and battle it out. So he's being confused by that makes me thinks he doesn't really know this game and how to play it really much at all.
So only to defend Tony, and I do think a lot of it, as you were saying, and it was called out by a lot of the players, was ego on his behalf. But I think he has a point that Avery's friends, Derek and Aviv, are very unlikely to be in a position of power, based only off of, he ends up being even more right because he doesn't realize that, targets are going to be identified by the winners of the elimination. Mm-hmm. But even just based off of 2 people who are going to step up and then win and beat all of the other eras, like Derek probably unlikely to do that. Aviv probably unlikely to do that as compared to Casey and Kyland. So I don't think he meant like you're blinded by friendship and you shouldn't be loyal to friends. I think he just meant you're putting your friends first who are never going to be able to return the favor. And I don't think he was wrong. Go ahead. I think he was wrong to go in over it because I don't think he was really going to get anything from Casey and Kyland. I think she's so great in the deliberation when she says, well, Casey hasn't given me her word. Like, they're not actually, I think those temporary deals are bullshit. I think what does matter is it's a little soon to piss off Era 4 and likely Era 1 because Darrell and Jody want Derek and Aviv. So you're pissing off 2 other eras and you're not really helping someone who's going to be likely to win. But I don't care. I liked what Avery did, but I don't know that it was like the best quote unquote game move.
But what's weird is like, so he's discounting strongly Era 2, but like Era 2 is not going to be able to help you. Era 2 finished second this week. So they beat Era 4 and Era 1. So
I don't think it's Era 2 is not going to be able to help you. I think it's like, are Derek and Aviv going to be in a position both from a social, like, are they both going to be, how likely are they both going to be the representatives of Gen and win versus Derek and Laurel, and like Laurel's not going to listen to you? You know, like, do they have the social capital, the game capital to back it up? Probably not.
But theoretically, if you're making that deal with Era 4, right? Like, oh, we'll keep Kylie and Casey, we're keeping you safe, we're keeping Era 4 safe. Why is the transitive property not there with Era 2? Be like, Derek and Aviv, we're keeping you safe. Let's make a deal with all of Era 2. Bananas, Laurel, Cara, I'll keep all of you safe. Like, what? Like, to me, those are people you would even want more in your corner. I'm like, look, Era 2, like, Tony, I know Bananas, you lost Leroy. I could be your new guy. Like, let's work together. I'm going to keep your whole era safe. And especially as the numbers dwindle, Era 2 conceivably could look stronger and stronger because if all of a sudden like they keep this going and it's like 6 or 7 people per team and their team is just Bananas, Cara, Laurel, and like all of a sudden that team looks like the monster team, I would want them in my corner, not really like Era 4 or Era 1 maybe.
Is Era 2 offering that though? Because to be honest, and I know Laurel gets, puffs her chest about being pissed on Avery's behalf, but is Era 2 upset if Derek and Aviv go in here? Probably not. So, or not as upset or not as willing to negotiate. It's kind of a win-win for them. Either like we trim the quote unquote fat of our team or some of it, and we, weaken the strongest duo alliance, like the most loyal alliance of Ryan and Derek, like, and we keep moving. I don't think they're as hindered. I think it's sort of like an Amanda level situation of like, we don't like to lose numbers, but were they like in at least their mind? Like Derek did great on All Stars. We haven't seen from Aviv. I don't mean to say that they're like the fat of the team, but do Bananas, Laurel, and Cara care if they go in? Probably not as much as Era 4 cares about Casey and Kyland.
Yeah, I mean, it would probably help to still have that buffer of at least a couple other people that if they feel like they would have control before they know how the targets are going to be kind of decided that they could like throw the targets on them and make them kind of the fodder for the slaughter going forward. So to lose like that, I think is probably not the best. You still don't want to lose numbers no matter what. You don't know how long it can be the teams. You don't want to like all of a sudden get down to 6 people and everyone else is at 8. So that can be kind of tough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. All we can do right is what we saw, which is like we didn't see them make the same kind of pleas, but I don't think those kind of short-term deals even matter regardless. No. I was more surprised that Avery didn't get steamrolled, if only because like it's very early to piss people off in general, and it's easier to say no blood on my hands. Darrell and Jody called you out, so I have to do that. Again, I respect the hell out of what Avery ends up doing, but I thought that was going to be sort of like the easier shot to take early on. I'm excited at the prospect of 40 and then what Darrell and Avery end up doing with the nominations. That people don't care. People are going to go after the big guns. We're not going to do the dance of waiting until it's the right time. Like we're going for it. And that's awesome.
Yeah. And look, I think Avery absolutely made the right call. I love to see it. It was a lot of fun. I also think her having people like Laurel in her corner being like, yeah, you stand up for them. Even Jenny, who was on the opposite team, being like, good for you, Avery, like, sticking up for what you're believing. I think if enough voices were in the room of convincing Avery to back down, I think there's a chance she does it. I think the fact that she had that support of her feeling like I don't really have many other people besides, Derek and Ryan. So the fact that I now have people like Laurel standing up for me, even like Jenny standing up for me, I feel like invigorated her even more. Like, yeah, screw this. This is absolutely right. And then the opposite side, I feel like you had people like Derek who were like, I think just like egging Tony on, because even him in the convention was like, this is crazy. I can't believe Tony's doing this. But he's like, screw it. If this kid's going to let his ego get in the way and he's going to throw himself in, let me see if I can convince him to do it. And he got, play like a fiddle. And Tony, had his ego kind of take over.
Yeah, we definitely saw that scene with Derek. I don't think that's what convinced him. Like, we do see a very convincing conversation from Bananas, I think, in the same vein as like the reverse of the Laurel and Jenny of like, Tony, I think if you were doing this for someone you care about, I'd be impressed. I'd be like, that's a huge move. Definitely do that. But you don't even know these people. Like, and I don't really believe that this is another point against Tony and whether he threw it is like, does Bananas cheering for Leroy with their history invalidate the good advice that Banana's giving to Tony here now? I don't know. But I do want to talk about the pitches made in deliberation, because I think, Derek definitely flubbed, but I think he started out with a great point of like, look, if this was reversed, I want to tell you right now, we wouldn't even have to deliberate. That was pretty strong and convincing. Well, yada, yada, that he said, our group wants to take big shots and forgot to clock Tony's huge ego. Like, he doesn't realize that, like, Tony, sorry, you're not a big shot in the game right now.
Right. Yeah, that was a bit of a foot in the mouth thing. And I was like, oh, God, is this just, is Derek just forcing their hand here to vote him in? But yeah, he was able to kind of walk it back a little bit and talk around it. Because, yeah, Tony definitely feels himself as the big shot to be thrown at.
How much backlash or blame do you think Darrell's going to get for calling out Aviv and requesting Aviv and Derek?
It's so tough because, like, technically, yes, he called out Aviv, but he didn't really. Like, he was saying, I don't want to go against Kyland. I want to go against Derek. Like, if this was like, you could pick one from each team, and he's like, I think you should vote in Aviv 1000%. Like, yeah, that's pretty crappy. But this is also Darrell being like, look, I'm here for my family. I want to do what's best for me. Yeah, me and Aviv are cool, but I'm not going to throw my game away for her. I want to do what's best for me. And what's best for me is to go against Derek. Like, sorry, that's what I'm going to do.
So it was not really clear to, well, regardless, I didn't think it was like clear enough that they wouldn't be playing as partners. But even either way, it's like a consequence, whether it unintended or intended, of him calling out Derek is him calling out Aviv. He's like, I'm willing to risk your game to give me a better chance. I don't think we could say on a technicality you had to come in, but I was focused on Derek. I think he's looking at the partnership and he's like, me and Jody would rather play against Derek and Aviv. Also, of course, than Kyland and Casey. Now, I don't think he's getting off on any technicalities there. I think the technicality to get off on is like, yeah, I would have called you out too if I'm Aviv and I'm in this position, because I don't want to go against Casey and Kyland either. The younger, the hungrier, the strong pairing. So I don't know how angry Aviv's going to be, because it was just like, so of course, like, and do you have to be expected to pull an Avery and be willing to throw your game away for your ally to be considered a good ally? I think no. I think it's reasonable that if it's going to be me or you, I've got to pick me, that has to be okay in a game like this.
I also think this is a lot easier for everyone to stomach because of how, like, what happened. Like, this is very much like a results-oriented thing that Aviv doesn't have to go in. Darrell wins. Everyone's happy. Everyone's back in the house. And it's like, we could just, like, maybe this is like, I won't forget, but I'll forgive type thing for Aviv. But it's very much not like, oh, now they're bitter rivals going at each other, because it all kind of worked out. They're all kind of, at this point, everything kind of turns up being like laughing at Tony and like celebrating Avery, and it's kind of like forgotten about, like, for Darrell and Aviv. Maybe not for Aviv fully, but like it could have been a lot worse.
And where does Aviv have to go? So like, okay, don't work with Darrell. Good luck, So
right, like if Aviv does go into elimination, is she like 100% naming Darrell a target? Like, to me, that's more of the Darrell target. Like, if Darrell targets Aviv, like, yes, that's turning your back on Aviv. But he didn't do that, so it's okay.
Are you surprised, and they talk about this at sort of the Greek gods, challenge gods party, that Derek let this happen, that Derek didn't, we didn't even get a scene of Derek kind of toying with the idea or talking to Avery about it.
Yeah, I'm surprised we didn't get the scene just because I would have loved to see what they each say. I think they would all. I think Derek could bring it up and they would be like, "No, like forget it. I'm doing this." And if that's a scene, I want to see it. I want to see Avery have that like defining conversation of like Derek, don't even. He like had the scene of like Derek walking up to Avery and her be like, "Don't even start. Like I'm not like throwing you in." Like just show that. Like it can even be like a 10-second scene. That would have been a nice thing to throw in.
And we got it with Darrell and the other Derek last season, last season. Well, I have to say, I have to give the Banana Man credit. He's like, if my own mother was up for elimination, I'd tell her she's got to lower her shoulder and take someone out in all umbrella. I was screaming, "Enjoy your flight home, Mom."
It's a good line. It's a good line. Yeah, iconic. And also it's like if you're in a partnership, you should read the room and be like, who has a better chance of winning? And yeah, if Bananas has a better chance than his mom. So
can we get an official ruling? And maybe you said that you think it was more about ego. Like, what percentage, if we're drawing a pie chart of Tony's, decision ultimately to stalemate, is game motivated, ego motivated, or if you want to throw in interested in going home? Can we break out the numbers on that?
Yeah, because it's so tough. Because my read watching it is 0% him just wants to go home, but everyone else saying it, and to your point, them showing it, makes me think it's like 100% that. Like in my head, I think it's probably 70% ego and 30% like he wants to make like a big show of it type of thing. Like maybe that's also ego. I don't know. But like that's, to me, watching it, that was his motivation. Is like he feels like he's not going to let Avery tell him what to do. He wants to do like this big thing. He genuinely thought Avery would back down, didn't do it, and now he's pot committed and he's just going to do it and go in. But the fact that like there was like 6 confessionals about people being like, yeah, Tony just wants to go home. Even after the elimination, Avery calls it out and TJ follows up and calls it out. Like it must have been that, because otherwise I feel like there's such an easy narrative to spin of either like clowning Tony for being an idiot or being like, look at Tony making a big swing and a miss and going home. Like there's so many other narratives they could have spun, but they went with he just didn't want to be here. So like, that had to be the reason.
Yeah, I feel like it's like 60, 30, 10. And the 10 is, everything I already said about like why they show it. And we'll talk about his actual performance, which I think is like the, 9% of my 10% is the actual performance. So it's like, I think it's 60%. It makes sense for his game. Like, I think they kind of played Tony out as making it like it made no sense for him wanting to target Derek and Avery. And for the reasons I've already said, like, I think it's like a pretty typical old middle school, middle-ish school era 2-3 strategy to like throw in Derek and Avery, try to make nice with everyone, try to lower your threat level, like whatever. I don't think, I think if Avery wasn't friends with Derek, that would have been the decision, like 100%. So in that respect, I think it was for his game. And then I do believe, like we've seen an older, worse side of Tony, 100%. Would Tony not want anyone, much less like a woman, telling him what to do when he thinks it should be an obvious decision? There's the 30% ego. And then, it's just hard for me to think Tony wanted to leave, because Tony's been so, and we talked about this in the preview, like screwed on getting eliminated early, or then in All-Stars, his big return, like having to go home early for family reasons. So it's just hard to believe that he doesn't have like the fight in him to want to stay, but that would be my breakdown.
I was also surprised, they flash back to the scene of when this happened with Zach and Amanda. They couldn't agree and they went in. And when they couldn't agree, like there was back and forth at the elimination.
Yeah.
He was like, you have one last chance. Like, are you really going to do this? And they just came there. And Avery, I think Tony says, oh yeah, we're deadlocked. And then TJ's like, okay, you're going in. I thought there'd be like, this is it. Are you really going to do this? Or like one more back and forth. Like Avery would be like, Tony, I am willing to do this. Like, are you really going to throw you? Like, I wanted to see their like force of each other at that moment. And it's almost like, did they slip the card in ahead of time that like, this is it? We're like deadlocked and like, there's no other conversation, because it felt so empty to not have that like one last stand for each of them to be like, don't do this.
I totally agree. It's almost like a function of, it seems like they're supposed to leave the deliberation room having locked in their vote.
Right.
As opposed to like when TJ calls them out in the arena to cast their vote. Like, because Tony comes out and tells someone like, we didn't make a decision in the room.
Yep.
And then when they're asked for their decision, Avery's like, go ahead, Tony, tell them. So I agree. Like, I think they need to be casting votes, even if it's fake, at the arena so that this plays out better. It felt very strange that there was no push pull, especially because they kept saying, like, oh, she called my bluff. It's like, well, it seemed like it was already decided and you knew she had called your bluff. So
right. I feel like the cards were flipped over.
Perfectly.
Everyone revealed what they had, and the pot was divvied up like that. Like the bluff was done.
Yep, totally. All right, let's talk about the big moment. Kylan and Nia make out, and I immediately am like, Josh isn't gonna love this. Meanwhile, we get Olivia and Theo also making out Michelle and Devin, which I want to asterisk. I feel like they made way too little of Michelle and Devin's hookup. I feel like that's something, it's not like Olivia and Theo who just met, or even Nia and Josh, or Nia and Kylan. Like Devin and Michelle, like the friends to lover story, just kind of getting yada yada. We'll see if they ever pick it back up, but I felt like that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I wonder if they almost didn't believe it as much. Like, is this really happening? And like, flash forward like 4 or 5 months later, and here we are. Yeah, that was interesting. But yeah, here we go, Josh. I mean, it's giving flashbacks a little bit to a different pairing that, of people that are not going to be named, especially one person of like a bad history on the show. But he kind of draws the short end of the stick here again. He had his eyes on Nia. Nia goes after Kylan, and then Tori, which I think if we're starting off with the pie scale of what was the motivation, I think alcohol is probably like 98% the driving factor here. But regardless, Tori's having a good laugh at Josh's expense, and Josh does not take too kindly to it, calls Tori out, and then it's also they get into like their history from World Championship, I think it was, or World USA
Challenge
2.
USA 2, yeah.
USA 2, when Tori inexplicably just threw Josh's name out there. Josh doesn't forget, and it seems like their friendship has kind of deteriorated since.
But was that consequential when Tori voted for Josh? I know she talked about it in all of her exit presses, like her big
I think he went
mistake
home.
and error. But he was only going to go home if she made the vote. I meant to look this up. Mm-hmm. Well, whatever. I mean, the editing was interesting because, first of all, I went back because I was like, what was said? What at least did we see? We don't know what Josh heard or whatever. Mm-hmm. But like, Theo says, Josh likes Nia for real. And Tori says, Josh isn't doing anything. And Theo said, he could be a pimp. I think that's what he said. And Tori went, eye roll. Like, I'm with like, I agree the pie chart has to be broken up, but like Josh went to bed. Josh wakes up to one of his best friends and the rest of the house giggling while the girl he has a crush on is hooking up with someone on his era. And kudos to Josh because he doesn't really fly off the handle in like a typical old Josh style. Now, is he channeling most of this too seriously at Tori and like calling her not his friend? Like, yes, and that's where I think alcohol is the enemy, ego's the enemy, whatever. But I think he legitimately has a reason to be upset here.
Oh, 100%. If I was like flirting with a girl interested in someone and my friend was like laughing while she was like hooking up with someone else and like mocking my chances with her, like that would be so mean, especially because like whether or not Josh thinks Tori is like they're good friends, like that's, you can call in the question. But Tori says to Josh, we're like best friends. So if in her mind, that is her best friend, that's so mean to be like making fun of him while he's also not even there. So we can't even be like funny banter of like poking fun at him while he's sitting on the couch and like they can have a laugh about it or whatever. Like he's not there in the room. He's sleeping. Theoretically, he might not see this till it makes air or like ever see it or hear people chatting about it. So it's so mean. It's so petty. And it's a really bad look for Tori.
I agree. And especially like what doesn't need to make air and we don't even need to talk about, but like you already referenced, like this has been a motif for Josh, like a theme where he's like going for the girl and he's never got a shot with her. There have been stuff that happened with Ashley that like, Josh has been sort of the butt of the joke or the butt of comments that he doesn't, endorse or want made or whatever. Like, that his friend doesn't need to participate in, even in a small way, even if that's not the point of this like kind of exchange. It's all in the background, and your friend should know that, like all of the history here. Where I think alcohol and ego come into play is like, I think Tori, to her credit, does try to de-escalate. Like, I am always in your corner and I'll be here when you're ready to talk to me. And Josh, game recognized game, is not quite ready to de-escalate. So that's when he elevates to like, you're not my friend. Like, I don't know that he really wanted to go there. It's just that's where things led to. I think he was ready to have that fight, and Tori de-escalating it wasn't working for him. So he did get under Tori's skin. I think they'll be okay. I just think they have to have kind of a sober conversation about it.
Well, what I think also irritated Josh is, like, yes, they had some history with like the voting and things, but I think Tori was trying to downplay what she was doing. She's like, "Oh, Josh, you're not really mad about this." And I think no, he was like legitimately mad about this.
100%.
And he was like, be like gaslit, like, "No, you don't really care about this. It's something much deeper. When you're ready, we'll talk through these deeper issues." He's like, "No, I'm upset about what you just did," and Tori just like wouldn't acknowledge it. Like, that would almost make me angrier. So like, not even acknowledge what you're doing was bothering me. So yeah, that was Tori. I think the alcohol was actually much more on Tori. It didn't seem like Josh was even that drunk. Maybe he was like, obviously he was sleeping, so maybe he was fine at that time. But and then it was just like perfect challenge moment to have like Michelle in the middle of the tennis match just like eating the noodles in perfect form. Like, that's what you get on a challenge. You don't get that on many other reality shows, is this type of fight and someone in the middle of it, like, like we've all done at like 2 a.m. eating noodles when you're like coming home from a bar. So it's great.
Yeah, and I think Michelle gives a confessional that's to your point of like, yeah, Tori like definitely thinks it's about the Challenge USA. Like, I don't think that's what this is about. So yeah, we'll see where that plays out. I hope everyone's good. Assuming everyone's good, it was a really nice little snack of like an old school kind of like less serious fight. Oh, you mean the noodles looked good?
Yeah, they look great. The noodles look great.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, look very buttery.
All right, let's go to the arena. Let this be a calling. Don't F with me. Tony, as TJ delivers, Tony and Avery are going to go in, which is just, insane.
Crazy. Insane. Great job for Avery, though. Like, as everyone pointed out, like, she has to do this. Like, she has to. Like, Derek is one of her only friends, good friends. Like, as they pointed out, this isn't some fake challenge friendship. They've known each other for a decade. They were roommates at a time. Like, this would be as bad as Bananas going against Leroy in like first day. Like, you don't do that. So good for her for standing up for it.
I don't think she has to do this. Like, I think it's awesome that she did it. I think she is much more likely to get invited back because she did this. I think she honored her friendship, and that was awesome. I think if she said to Derek, I fought tooth and nail, you saw me at the deliberation fight tooth and nail, I did everything but be willing to go in myself, I think Derek would focus his energy, like everybody else in the house did, on Tony. I don't know that. Again, in the same way I feel about Aviv and Darrell, I think if it's going to be me or you, I could still be a solid ally. But if it comes to me and you, I've got to pick me. I think that's reasonable. And I think Derek would understand that. I think, again, it's badass. It's cool. It's a great move for her longevity. It works out for her. A+++. But I don't think she had to. I don't think Derek would have held it against her. Look at Olivia and Michelle. Like, nobody cares that Michelle sent Olivia in. That's her number one.
Yeah, I think that's a little different. I think Olivia was kind of like okay with it to like mend the fence also with Nerys and like take the bullet there. I don't know. I think Derek would be pretty upset, and I think he would have every right to be, because like to me this would be like, if not now, when? Like, this is first week of a season. It's not the end of the game. It's not, the money's not on the line. You're going like for your opponent. They're choosing between two people they've never met before. Like, if you don't stand your ground now, like, what good is Avery as an ally going forward? To like, where does she ever going to stand her ground? Like, this is it. Like, you have to stand your ground here. You have to.
I think you should never go in yourself. Like, I think Derek shouldn't have gone in. Like Derek K last week. I think to send yourself in is objectively a terrible move. It worked out for her. I cannot co-sign that's the ally move, is to send yourself in when you've won.
It's not the ally move, but it's like, if you're to be a good ally is also to stand up for,
well, that's the ally move.
Good decisions. And like, but if you can't if you can't get your way here, what good are you of an ally if you're not then also willing to be like Avery backing down here? for her allies and friendships going forward, it's when can you ever rely on her to? Cause she couldn't convince Tony to do what you wanted her to do, which is already pretty bad because this was such an easiest move. And then if she's just going to back down and you're going to go in, like what really good is she as like a strong alliance member?
I mean, making a vote. Like, I think like this is such a specific situation, right? If it's the two people voting, right? Like if she were voting in a group of 10 people, like she's a reliable vote. Like, again, I think I hear you. And again, like if what happened is on your side because it was an incredible moment. I'm not docking her for that. I cannot co-sign that an ally has to go in themselves. And it's not just that Avery like rolled over. I think Michelle rolled over, and it's a fair point that like Olivia was more fine with it than we saw, but like Avery didn't roll over, and the entire team, like 3/4 of the house, couldn't turn Tony. Like I don't think anybody would look at this as like if basically Avery did everything she did, and then when TJ was scolding them, she was like, I can't go in. Fine. Again, I think the audience would be less into it. I think Derek might be upset, but I would still stand by like she did everything except go in herself, and that's all I can expect of an ally in a game, especially someone like Avery. Like, and maybe I shouldn't be thinking about this, but this is the challenge. If it's Cara, if it's Laurel, if it's somebody who's got a locked-in ticket as many times as they want, a bad season is a bad season. I'll be back, whatever. Fine. Avery is in, I think, a worse position than Derek in terms of returning ability. She has more to lose by going home early than Derek, or at least she's in kind of the same position. So why, because I won and you lost, do I have to go in? How about you win next time and then you don't have to go in?
Yeah, this is also, but the way it worked out, this is like the home run hit for Avery. Like now she skyrockets up. I feel like a lot of people's boards.
100%. And I said that it's the best. It's her best outcome possible. I'm not critiquing the move. It's awesome. It's longevity. Even if she goes home, she escalates her possibilities of coming back. So it's a right move from a television perspective and for her career and the challenge. I stop short of everything else, but I'm on board. It was awesome. It was awesome to watch. I give her flowers. I don't mean to like make it a demerit.
Yeah, and all the points to show the fact that it's like tooth and nail to like see the world for Avery to make this decision. It's that much horrible for Tony to do this, where there is nothing for him to do this. And again, now I'm going back to like maybe he did just want to go home because it's such a preposterously bad decision to do this to save Kylan and Casey, who do not know you from a hole in the wall. I guess maybe Kylan does because he went back and watched every season. But for Casey, he does not know you from a hole in the wall.
And can beat you. At least Derek and Aviv are less threatening to Tony.
Right. It's just such an unbelievably bad move. And maybe like you could put it on like the Mount Rushmore of maybe the stupidest decisions in like a reality TV competition history. It's like that level of bad. But it's just such a preposterous decision. And I'm so happy with the way this went home. I would have felt it would have been such like an icky feeling if Tony won and Avery lost. And it just everyone can be sunshines and rainbows with the way this went down, except for losing Jody, who I feel kind of just gets like the yada yada on her way out. But for everyone else, I think everyone's like doing cartwheels.
Yeah. I was sort of happy for that reason to see it, divide into an individual game because I really wanted Darrell to stay and I was rooting for Avery, even though, again, I agree with you. I think Jody kind of got a short end of a stick over these two episodes and I like Jody. But, there's space for her in the All-Stars oeuvre. Again, I'm sorry, I'll stop saying this. I do wish they knew that it would be played individually when they were making this decision. Now they know. So like, again, it's like, why not know the first
But also
one?
Now they know, but also do they know? Because would you put it past them that they're paired together at another elimination? So they don't really know.
But I'll complain about that too, because I think this is really good in terms of keeping it possible for the teams to stay teams as long as possible. Because like, you don't have to lose two people from one era every week. I think it's a good equalizer, especially because the challenge is not willing to sit people out or make accommodations for uneven teams. So at least we don't get into a huge deficit.
Yeah.
or
Which,
less
I mean,
likely
obviously we
to.
could. We just happen to
Yeah,
work
less
out it didn't
likely.
go that way. But yeah, I'm glad we're not. It's not forcing the issue of having 2 people from one era go home, because then 2 bad weeks and all of a sudden you're down to 4 people, and it's like, what are we even doing here?
So while I wish they all 4 ran this challenge at once, I did like the sort of logic puzzle with a
Mhm.
slight physical element.
Yes, it was very good, very fun elimination. It was also the way the house kind of really rallied. I mean, they definitely rallied for Avery, but there was definitely enough of a contingent that was pulling for Jody, because she was just also collateral damage in here. But the way to see everyone rooting basically for Darrell was giving very much, to a different degree, of like the Turbo vibes of when the entire house, kind of similar logic-y physical puzzle, but everyone was pulling basically for Darrell. I don't even know if Tony was really getting much help, that much at all, which, I know to your point, Tony did suck in this elimination. He was quite bad. But everyone else had people helping him, had people helping them. And if this was like a silent elimination, I don't know how well other people would have done. We saw people make mistakes, and if they were just operating on their own, they might have done kind of as bad as Tony or ish. So it's hard for me to really slight him when he didn't have the help that other people had.
So he had all of his era helping him, because like Bananas and Jordan point out a mistake. Maybe Devin tells Jordan, like they point out that Tony made a mistake and Tony fixes it kind of early on.
I thought they were just talking to themselves. Were they shouting it out?
No, they I think Devin whispered to Jordan, and Jordan was like, Tony, you have blue next to yellow and they can't touch. Like, but sure, like, was it the volume? Maybe not. But like at the end of the day, as much as people didn't like Tony's decision, his own era is incentivized to help him. Like you're always,
Totally.
unless people think you're a physical deterrent to the team, your era is incentivized to help you. And again, from the editing perspective, one of the things, I don't know if we explained the challenge. Basically, they just had to put a bunch of tiles in a row and follow this like logic pattern of what colors could touch which. It looked like there was a bit of a physical endurance element because the tiles weren't that light. If they made a mistake, I think you had to like undo the whole ladder.
Whole
so
thing,
perhaps that happened to Tony and they didn't show it. And so when Darrell finished, Tony only had like 4 tiles in place. But from the edit, it looked like Tony only had 4 tiles in place.
Yeah, I mean, Tony. The problem with Tony is he made multiple errors, and I think other people made like 1 error total. Like I think Avery and Jody both were like 2/3 of the way in, and they both had to completely scrap it because they both kind of started from the wrong place and had to completely start over. So I think everyone made an error, but yeah, Tony was just kind of like doing his own thing, and I think he was like putting down purple or something like that first, and you couldn't even use purple. Like he was kind of like that far off.
And in terms of luck, right? Like it's a great hand to be dealt for Avery against Jody. I think Jody even says that. Like it's like the absolute last thing she'd want to see, especially against Avery, where if it was physical, it would be a really good chance for her. And it's also not a good flop for Tony, who, it's certainly not what I would think Tony's strength is.
No, and it's kind of like similar for like Darrell. Like he needed like that extra level of help. I think Darrell could have struggled. This was like a logic thing. He also caught a break because if this was Kylan, like this is like kind of Kylan's specialty. Like I think he had an elimination of doing like a puzzly thing where you like roll the ball back and forth. So I feel like Kylan would smash something like this. So Darrell definitely caught a break there. But this also goes to show like not every elimination to be fun and entertaining needs to be all brawl balls in. Like this was to me a great elimination. Put it in like the cycle. And if you want to critique, like maybe do a round where they're on their own and they can't have audience helping out. That's always an issue. But for the structure of elimination, this was a great one.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, you're very worried about the eliminations only.
I am. I'm very worried. I don't know.
It's just
everyone always points to
changed.
Like hall brawl. I don't know. What gets
but
me?
But like the last 2 challenges, you complained about that.
Yeah, but I'm circling back. I feel like I pushed the scale too far, and everyone's like on that side. I'm like, no. Let's back up a little bit. I don't know. They're too far because anytime that there's comparisons of like who's better in the challenge, who's better, it's always like, oh, who would win at hall brawl? And it's like hall brawl is like 0.1% of the skill sets you need to win the challenge. And I hate that it's like boiled down to that because that's like not what this show is. It's not really what it should be. And there's so many other things that go into it. And I just hate that it's like, oh, who would win in a hall brawl? Like hall brawl is like nothing. And it's also like it's usually a very bad elimination. Like let's skew away from that. Let's get to like who would win the logic puzzle of lifting the heavy things. Because that's usually more what matters.
Dare I say you're too online? Because I don't know that like this feels very Twitter. Like who's saying this? Like who is saying this? We're not saying this.
I'm deep on I'm deep in like these TikTok things. My brain is rot. Who knows what's going on anymore?
I feel like we're not saying that. I feel like the 800 plus people in the challenge group are necessarily saying this. So it's gonna be okay. I agree with you. I
gotta go touch grass.
I'm not saying that. I'm touch our Facebook group. Like I think this was a good challenge. Like I'm with you, and I think it's a great offset from like the 4 very physical eliminations we saw. Although this is probably more in line with like the era 4. I forget what it's called. Like JCT Memorial Challenge where they have to like tie ropes and then untie the rope. So this is more in that where it's a physical element, but there's also brain power. It's logic. It's puzzle. That we're doing great. I think the challenges have been great. The eliminations have been great. I think we're doing great.
You know what's doing great? When TJ announces, so we got the winners, and he declares, so going forward, there are going to be targets for each week, and this is where
one thing I have to say. Please. Avery called Adam's children her stepchildren. I feel like we have to flag that. I have nothing to say about it. I just want to flag it. Huge.
That was a big deal. Yes, we also could have flagged. We didn't flag Nerys Windap Horacio's kids last week. Also, that didn't.
Well, we knew that, like that. We didn't know that Adam and Avery were so hot and heavy.
Love that for her. Good for her.
Star turn for your girl.
Yeah, I was there day one. With my girl. So TJ announces the winners of the elimination will pick the targets for next week, which will set the stage for who will be in power, who will go straight to elimination, and who will be voted on to go into elimination. And at this point, all of my fears for what I thought to be a terrible structure did a full 180, and I'm like, this is maybe the best structure they've ever had, and this is fantastic.
Yeah, I think everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief here after being worried throughout the whole episode about the format. I think it's excellent. I think there's an argument that someone could make is it too much power for the winning team. And we're going to be, watching. But like, I think it's normal. You watch challenges where a quarter of the people are in the top group basically and everybody else is vulnerable. I think that's fine. I think also now that they know, the eras are probably going to have some chats. People are going to be strategizing cross era. It's not just going to be a pure decision of 2 people. It's going to be like informed by their alliance. So I think this is great. I'm very, very excited to see, how it turns out. But Amanda being here would be so much more interesting. Another sad note on Amanda.
That makes me so upset because all I need is for Amanda to make Tori a target. And I just need whatever Tori is made a target. I need someone to be like, I'm summoning my Amanda, and she's telling me to call out Tori, and that's what I'm doing. We need that. Oh, that's so disappointing. That would have been an all-time moment. Damn it.
Now, it is very interesting that TJ tells us Darrell's going to select the women and Avery's going to select the men, as opposed to the 2 of them having to make a decision together. Probably because 2 people on different eras, we'd have to spend too much time hearing the deliberation to get them on the same page. So I'm fine with it. It also kind of prevents just an absolute slaughtering of the strongest men and the strongest women. Because if this is ultimately going to go into an individual game where there's going to be some kind of pairings in the final, men are incentivized to keep strong women, women incentivized to keep strong men. So I'm tentatively also okay with that being sort of the device. I don't know, whatever format.
Yeah. I also like the cross-gendering picks because while there could just be tit for tat going back and forth a little bit, it's not as direct. So the winner next week, if whoever wins for the men elimination is not automatically going to pick Darrell, and it's going to be oh, Darrell's in, and then he's automatically going to pick whoever picked him. It's not going to go back and forth because they don't have that tit for tat, and the fact that they are competing individual, it's not as direct of a hit every single time. So one of them could win, one of them can lose. The person Darrell picked could one of them is going to win, one of them is going to lose. It's not going to be as I feel like it's not. I feel like I'm not making myself clear. It's not as locked in who would go after who if they're just returning fire.
I mean, but I think if Darrell picks Anissa and Anissa wins, Anissa is incentivized to put Darrell up. I don't know that I agree that just because it's cross gender. But it doesn't feel as personal. It's not like it's not him calling them out to like go against him or whatever. It's not like a Pauly Theo situation. And maybe because it's sort of like spread out targets, it won't hit as hard. Like if Anissa doesn't, I'm just using Anissa because it's an era one, but let's say Laurel and Bananas don't win, they come in second place and they don't go in. Like then it would have to take 2 cycles like for Laurel to be a target again. There's going to be so many more people to be angry at by then, maybe.
That's a good question. See. Can you repeat as target? So obviously one of them is going to go home, so they can't, and one of them is going to win the elimination, so they can't. But can you pick someone who was a target as a target?
We haven't been told you can't, but we could learn that next week. It wouldn't be applicable here, probably. I mean, we didn't get told that the people who were leaders, quote unquote, can't be targets. And in fact, they are. Like Anissa was, right? Wasn't Anissa for Era 1? Now she's it again.
No, she wasn't for Era 1. Jody was.
Duh.
But yeah, so no one here was.
So there are no repeats. Interesting.
Is that just a coincidence? Or like were Darrell, or not like, were Darrell and Avi, like were they not on the table?
We'll see. We'll see. It's also a lucky draw for us, a fascinating couple of Darrell and Avery for what it could have been of like who volunteers, to have 2 kind of like not disconnected people, not in the like Tory alliance or any like big alliance, being in power, made it, I think, for very interesting target choices. So let's go into those.
Yeah. And Tina with very final confessional talking about Darrell not liking kind of the spotlight of having to make these decisions, like the hubba. That was very funny. So they start off, Era 1 picks Avery, picks Derek because Derek was not looking at her. And Darrell picks Anissa.
No surprise. I mean, I'm surprised Anissa didn't do a little advocating before Darrell made the pick. Like either amongst the team or like Darrell, I was just in, like pick this person, pick Tina, whatever. Because I think she could have known it was coming to her. I don't know how many surprising hits Anissa's going to have to take before she's like, stop treating me like I'm the lowest rung on this ladder and not your friends.
Yeah, I feel like Anissa, as much as she's going to have a reprieve if she goes in, like she'll have that like week off if she wins the elimination. But Anissa, of all the people, seems to be like the one most likely to go like off on of being a target.
Totally.
For Era 2, Avery picks Bananas and Darrell picks Laurel. I mean, shoot in the sky right there.
I wish Cara would throw the challenge next week. She won't, but I wish she would. I think they're very likely to win next week, actually.
Yes, and as Cara points out, this is incentivize them to at least try next week. It would be quite funny to watch Cara try to throw it to that Bananas and Laurel. And honestly, she does it. Golf clap, incredible. That would be such a fun TV moment if she can try to pull that off. Especially because it is trivia next week, so there is probably some like individual sway of like you can try to throw it and loot like get your questions wrong, something like that. So there might be some way to kind of go about that. Era 3, Avery gets Jordan to self-volunteer, classic Jordan fashion. Hardo. Darrell picks Naya to go in.
Now, in Jordan's defense, there is some like synergy to like throwing yourself in so that the person from your own era doesn't have to like cause issues amongst the teams or like stress or whatever, piss someone off. But like same rules apply. You should never be throwing yourself in. I draw the line there. There's some decent strategy there, but you're never going to get me to say that that's cool. So boo,
as we're
Jordan.
learning from Big Brother this season, stop volunteering for the block people. So stop doing it.
Yeah, I'm definitely watching Big Brother, and I know what you're talking about.
For Era 4, Avery picks Horacio and Darrell.
We didn't even talk about Naya.
Oh yeah, Naya.
Her politicking did not keep her safe here from being nominated.
Well, she got Kylan. If Kylan went in and won, she would have been safe, but didn't get it from Darrell. So what can you do?
And Jordan and Naya, interesting pair with their history. So we'll see.
Yes. And then Darrell. Avery picks Horacio and Darrell picks Jenny, even though she may give him a headlock.
Shots fired. I will say credit to Tori again. I think she's my MVP of the episode of like, it's sort of amazing that Darrell doesn't pick Tori based on the list of people that they're picking. He's willing to call it Jenny, who's huge. He's willing to call out Laurel, who's huge. He calls out what he believes is his weakest member of his era in Anissa, which is exactly how you should play it when it's your era. And then he hits Naya and not Tori. And I think that's a huge credit to Tori's social game and how protected she is and the work that she's been doing.
And I think someone who, again, I feel like this structure really helps him is Devin. Because if you're talking targets for era 3 men, obviously Jordan is like a huge target every time he's on the board. And then if you're debating between Corey and Devin, it's like if you pick Devin, now you're getting the wrath of Tori possibly coming back at you. So why wouldn't you just pick Corey? And also, if you're trying to weaken them, you might look at Corey also. Devin, once again, it seems like he's in the structure of a season, working his way to sneak his way on through.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan volunteered. I think Jordan's volunteering not to like save Devin, but it will be interesting to watch.
In weeks that Jordan doesn't volunteer.
Yeah, totally.
How do you not target Jordan?
Valid, unless they win and era 3, he could keep the winning hand. And I think he is one to think like that too. Again, like I don't endorse the decision, but it's like if we could keep winning and I know I'm going to go in and win eliminations, I can keep my team looking how I want it to look. So I'm going to Aussie it and send myself to Redemption Island. We'll see.
Yep.
Speaking of Redemption Island, we don't, as we said, we don't get the karma vote. We're going to find out next week if CT is going to be eliminated from the game due to Siobhan principles and during the trivia. Before we get to the connections, let's do the drinking game. We don't have the full drinking game report, but do we want to add a rule?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like there's got to be some type of rule with these target picks, right? And I was trying to think like how to do it. What's like a fun, specific thing to do? And I the closest thing I landed on was if you pick a target, this is like really specific though, like picking a target from like your individual, like your same season, like Avery picking Jordan. But I don't know, I couldn't land on something like that was fun for who the target pick should be.
So you're saying you don't have a rule tag?
I don't. I was trying to workshop it in my head. I was like, how do we like? Because to me, there's got to be something we pick for the targets. Like this selection is like, oh, that's a drink. But
how about any time someone volunteers themselves?
Okay, that's.
I also had one. So I really wanted to do anytime there's like a Tony pun. Tony makes a pun about time because he's like the Flavor Flav of the challenge. Then he got eliminated, and what's crazy is I wrote a new rule and I cannot find it in my notes. I must have deleted it. So we're going to have to go to, I'm going to now take credit for saying anytime someone sends themselves in.
We can also do, because I think this could be a recurring thing. Anytime Anissa complains that she's on the outs of her team. So we can toss that.
Okay. Anissa complains. Okay, great. All right. Do you want to reveal, I know this because you put in the Facebook group, the connections answer from last week?
Yes. So the connections, as a reminder from last week, was Laurel, Nelson, Sarah, and Shane. And the answer, I thought I put whoever got it, but I guess I didn't get it. There was a couple people got in the Facebook group. It was that they all beat Kara in an elimination.
You can't fool people with the cross-gendered pairing.
So this one.
You can fool me, but you can't fool the audience.
I think this is a little harder, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm trying to gauge like how hard and specific I can get with this. That's what she said. Connections for this week. Tori, Leroy, Nani, and Fessy.
Tori, Leroy, Nani, and Fessy?
That is the connection. That is the foursome.
Okay, even though we've been on the podcast for an hour and a half already, first of all, thanks to You Are All Trippin' for the 5-star review. We appreciate you. Could leave us a review on your podcatcher of choice. We'll only see it on iTunes, or Apple Podcasts. I just want to say, I was watching this and I thought, they should really be selling the merch from the eras because, like, I think it's cool that the jerseys this year have like the 1, 2, 3, or 4 shield, and you could like decide like which era you are. So I went to the ParamountShop.com and they are selling it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's cool. And then they're selling some personalized shirts. Now, Kyle Picard showed us in the Challenge Face group that he bought the TJ one, which is epic. So these are, don't look, but they're like shirts that have a player's face with like the lightning in the back and like their name really big, like the kind of like trendy shirts now.
Mm-hmm.
There are 3 contestants that have shirts for sale. And I can't verify that they never had other contestants. These are the only 3 currently for sale, and there's no other ones that say sold out. So I only have reason to think that these 3 are the only 3. Who do you think are the 3 contestants that they've made an individual personalized shirt for? I will send you. Did you see the TJ one?
Well, I saw the TJ one. Yes.
Okay, so it's in that style. So there are 3 contestants.
Okay. Are they all from 3 different eras?
No.
Interesting.
Well, not all of them are on this season. It's unrelated to the season.
Is there a Wes?
No Wes. I'll give you 3 strikes before I tell you. Strike 1.
Are any of them on this season?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, my first guess was bananas. But I feel
Survey says strike 2. Now, I do wonder if, like, I don't know how they deal with the licensing. Like, Banana sells his own merch. Maybe he's like, you can't use my image. I don't know.
That's a good point. Who would not be on this season that would have this merch?
I would say wild. This. You have 1 strike left. Focus on who is on this season because I think you're more likely to get that.
I'll say I feel like it's got to be Kara or Laurel. I'll go with Kara.
I thought for sure you were going to go West Bananas and then get the next one right and say CT. You're on both Kara and Laurel. It is CT, future host of the challenge, Anissa, and Nani.
What the heck? This is a connections game. What do they have in common?
Anissa, CT, Nani, and TJ. Get your merch now. Not a sponsor.
That's wild. I mean, I love Nani, but that's a wild trio that has merch.
All right, so that's it. We did it.
Right.
I got to go back into the club.
All right. We'll be back next week for episode 4. You can subscribe. robhaswebsite.com/challenge feed. Twitter, Cohen Brian _ TikTok, challenge wrap-ups. Follow you. Don't follow me anywhere. Follow me here. And New Girl Old Guy. We're back, baby. 2 in a row. Incredible. Join us there. Anchor.fm/New Girl Old Guy. Incredible. Till next time. Have a good one.